All right, we've started.
We have indeed.
So, welcome, Steve. This is the first, our first day of recording when it comes to our new show. So, the name of the show we still haven't fully agreed on yet, but the subject today, well, maybe we should start by introducing ourselves and having a bit of a background about it, each other.
Yes, well, I'm Stephen, aka the Prophet. I've done many things in life. At the moment, I'm driving rigs on the interstate and loving it.
Excellent. And my name's Clarke. I'm the prototypical nerd. I've worked in IT for the last 16 years, degree in computer science, and I guess I'm here to discuss with Steve the bigger aspects of life apart from computing. So.
We can't write a formula for everything, can we?
No, we can't. So the subject of today's show is marriage is the modern day slave trade. Now, before we get started on our show today, we should tell the listeners and viewers out there that our show topics will be the topics that people don't usually talk about. They're all the things that people really would like to listen to, but we're not really allowed to talk about in everyday life. So they're controversial subjects, they're the subjects that make people somewhat uncomfortable. These are the sorts of things that Steve and I are most interested to talk about.
Yes, but we've got to put in the disclaimer also that neither of us are married, so we are actually able to have an opinion on the subject.
This is the thing, and I guess as two free men, we don't have we're not bound by marriage, so we're able to converse on the subject without walking on eggshells, so to speak.
Yes, neither of us have to look for somewhere to sleep tonight.
It's very good. I must say, since I became single, the story is that I've been in 2 long-term relationships and neither of them worked out. First was with a feminist, and that led to a whole lot of fights and arguments, in a whole lot of problems. Second was with what I'd say, she herself described herself as a lesser feminist, a soft feminist. She believed in equal rights, but that also got into a lot of arguments and nagging and all the rest of that sort of stuff. So I guess you could say that I've had 2 long-term relationships, and I've failed at both, even though they were for a number of years, and my 20s were spent in long-term relationships, and towards the end I wanted to achieve peace of mind. I wanted freedom, I wanted my independence, and I didn't want to be bound by I guess the conventions and the requirements, the duties, the expectations.
The roles, perhaps?
The roles, exactly. I felt that I kept asking myself, well, what is my role here in this relationship? And I kept feeling that I was there to be an entertainer, to be a financial provider, to be a security guard, and be a whole lot of other things which a resource. And
well, it sounds to me very much like the relationship was driven by fears, perhaps not yours.
Well, this is it. If comfort and security are the main drivers that women hope to achieve in a relationship, their fears, I guess my role was also to be there to assuage those fears, so to speak, and to provide that comfort and security.
Well, all decisions are made from a position of fear, and I'm guessing your decision to end the relationship or relationships was based on the fear of losing your peace of mind.
I'd say I'd actually lost my peace of mind in both those relationships, and it had been taken from me over a long period of time.
So slowly you hardly noticed.
I'm like the frog in the boiling pot.
Yes, but where it all falls apart is when it becomes obvious to you that something is different here. And damage control, large decisions have to be made. if your peace of mind was taken from you, that therein lies the problem. That yes, it was taken from you, but you were unable to accept it. Whereas many people in happy relationships and happy marriages do accept that that peace of mind has taken from them, and they're just okay with it. The happy slave syndrome.
Well, see, it's interesting because over the course of many years, what I kept feeling was that I was never entirely happy. I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, that I couldn't express my true feelings, that I couldn't, be the man that I really wanted to be. I didn't have the freedom that I wanted. I had to keep checking in. I had to keep explaining myself. I had to, I just never felt that comfort in the relationship. It always felt like I was there as a servant. And I think it's not just me. There were many other men that I met along the way, men I really wasn't even allowed to have met, men like yourself, who I would never have met unless I did have that deep down feeling that something wasn't right, which I guess led me to engage with other men, to ask them about their relationships and their thoughts and their feelings, and whether I was just the odd one out. Was I crazy, or was this something that was common?
Well, it sounds to me like in your mind you traded things for other things. What is commonly known as the deal with the devil. The question for you is, did you pay the market value? Were you comfortable with the price that you paid? Sounds to me like you had everything except freedom of thought.
It's interesting that you mentioned freedom of thought, because I remember with the first relationship with Miss Feminist, she had issues with me doing any kind of research about World War II. And that got to me, because I thought, well, hang on a second, if I'm not even allowed to get on the internet and do my own independent research, whether it be about war or any other subject, that's a problem. And I guess it was only later that I truly understood the danger that I was in with being in a relationship with a feminist with that women's studies degree that she had in the first place. I mean, I was a young guy. I was 22 years old when I met her. She was 7 years older, and I guess at the end of the day, she had more experience than me. I didn't see the danger. I had no one around to warn me. But I never really had I guess I didn't know at the time to ask the right questions. I didn't ask questions like, well, hang on a second, why is an older woman interested in me as a younger man?
Easy to manipulate young men. The answer is obvious.
And why?
Because they have a higher sex drive. The price of sex is much greater than an older person. A person in that situation is easy to manipulate.
And isn't that interesting? I also thought to myself, well, hang on, why is it that this 29-year-old feminist hasn't found herself a boyfriend or a husband or a partner, when at the end of the day, men are very interested in sex, but all these men are avoiding her. Why are they avoiding her?
Price was too high.
This is it.
Price was too high.
This is it.
But however, when your car is almost ready to run out of petrol, does it matter whether it's 50 cents a litre, $1 a litre, or $5 a litre? You have no choice. You've got to buy it.
This is it.
It's all about your needs.
Mm.
And it's what you're prepared to trade for those needs. And it's the same for everybody. And relationships are really nothing more than the exchange of needs, whether it be willingly or unwillingly. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's very true. And let's talk about needs. We have the need for shelter, security, the need for sex and companionship. I provided shelter for her. She lived in a place which I was renting. She came and lived with me. But she was never really fully happy because I was living also with somebody else. I had a housemate. And over time she sought to, she wanted to get rid of the housemate.
Split the allies.
Yeah, exactly. She was never really happy with having another person in the house. She wanted the traditional relationship. She wanted to be married. and wanted us to go and buy a house together. Yet I, as a young man, I was thinking to myself, well, no, I don't want to move in this direction.
Can I correct you on the together part? It sounds to me like she wanted you to buy her a house to live in.
That's very true. Although she kept saying that we could buy it together, she never really had the money to buy a house together. I'd be the one who was providing most of the finance.
I'm struggling to understand what's together about that.
I'm struggling to understand the equality about it as well, especially considering I was with Miss Feminist.
But therein lies the question. Feminism is by definition the concept that women are equal to men in every way. I'm not sure how that scenario you've explained to me makes the two people equal.
Well, this is it. Although there is an interesting addendum to this. Her parents, her father was offered us some money, offered to sell some shares and provide us with some money to provide a deposit for a house, which I actually very politely refused.
Yeah, they call that a golden chain.
Yeah, and I saw it for what it was, a golden chain or golden handcuffs, and very wisely, considering my age back then, I'm 36 now, but I was 22 back then, and I politely declined it. I kept having the feeling in the relationship that something was amiss. Why was I so special? It never really felt like, it sort of felt like I was being played, and that I was operating to the agenda of another person. And essentially I was. It was her interest in getting married, having security, and having a traditional, life path that she wanted. It was never about my needs. It was never about what I wanted.
There are four very basic needs. There is food, warmth, shelter, and love. Traditionally, the man has provided the food, the warmth, and the shelter, whether it be pay for the food or go and shoot rabbits, build a house or buy one, split the firewood or turn on the ducted heating. Traditionally, he has paid for them. It's just the only thing that has changed is how he has achieved it in a modern society. The woman, her role traditionally has been to provide the love, but however, in recent times, the love is not unconditional. It comes at a price. And therein lies the problem. And you're unhappy with that price.
Yeah, definitely. And I was unhappy with the role as well that I was playing in the relationship. I never felt like I was being treated as a man, as a masculine man. I never felt that I truly had that feeling that all men wanted to feel when they're in a relationship.
Wanted or needed?
Maybe I'd probably say needed.
Ego never wants. Ego only ever needs.
Yeah, this is it.
So it sounds to me like your ego was making the decisions in that relationship, and when logic and common sense, the groundswell became overwhelming, a difficult decision had to be made.
This is it. But it was interesting. I chose the path to break up with her, and but then I ended up in but another relationship, and it was a similar sort of thing, although not as it wasn't with another feminist. It was with someone I'd describe as a softer feminist, but it was still another long-term relationship, and I still didn't have those feelings of freedom, and I didn't have those feelings of being treated as a masculine man. I think there's something more about our society and living here in the Western world, that men and women, we now have equality between the sexes, but to achieve that equality, to me it always felt like I was walking on eggshells. It wasn't until I actually went over to Thailand and started having experiences over there where it isn't an egalitarian society, and there is an underclass of people over there, but I had some of the best experiences of my life over there, and it was with people who would be considered to be working class or an underclass.
There's an old song, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. It sounds very much like in those two long-term relationships there was a lot to lose, and you could start to see the picture of everything that was going to be lost. However, loss of freedom, financial loss,
time,
definitely time, loss of good years of your life. In other countries, particularly third world countries, the losses are very different due to exchange rates in different societies. And hence, we see a very different value in the exchange of one person's needs for another.
Yeah, and it's been interesting in my travels in Thailand. I've been over there for a number of years now, sometimes for months at a time, and seeing my value as a Western man and how I'm looked up to over there by the Thais instead of being looked over. And I always had the feeling here that in relationships and whilst I was between relationships and I was out there on the street, nightclubs, bars and all the rest of that sort of stuff, or just in everyday life, it never felt to me like I was being looked up to by the women that I wanted to be looked up to by. Young, beautiful, the types of women that every man really wants to be with. It always felt like I was being looked down upon, and I never really felt as a high status man until I actually went to Thailand and was being looked up to. And that's when I realised that back here in the Western world, I was being looked over, which made me very angry, actually.
We live in a society in Australia where the man has lost his empowerment over being used as a resource. It can either be taken from him voluntarily or taken from him against his will. Of course, the noose around his neck is that of marriage and children. Once he has committed to that, and marriage is really nothing more than promises in the year of an election. Once he has committed to that, the exit is very expensive, whether it be his decision or her decision. As in all relationships, and it doesn't matter whether it's a marriage, a long-term relationship, a friendship, family relationship, often those that contribute the least draw the most at the end. We live in a society, by and large, where 20% of the people support the other 80%. And I don't think that long-term relationships and marriages are any different than what is just generally happening in a society.
Which is really interesting. And I guess you have to ask yourself, as a man, what is my role here? And you can sort of think of the corporate world and how everything works there with, I guess, people have got a performance agreement, they've got a list of roles and responsibilities.
Deadlines and commitments.
Exactly. And I guess if you look at a marriage and a modern day marriage, you could boil it all down to roles and responsibilities. So, and if you look at the responsibilities that you have as a man, it seems to be a laundry list of requirements that you need to fulfill. Whereas, for a woman, in many cases, the way men seek women, they'll seek youth and beauty in a woman, and they don't have that large laundry list of requirements that, say, a woman has that a man needs to live up to. I mean, many women have got this laundry list that says a man has to be tall, good-looking, financially successful.
Good job, nice car.
Yeah, own his own home.
Good family, good inheritances coming.
Yeah.
Everything that you can possibly think of. Good genes.
Yeah.
Good health.
Yeah.
We've glossed over one point, and that is that what keeps human beings healthy and functional is competition. And when you place people in an environment, any environment, where resources are plentiful, food is plentiful, and you eliminate the competition through fear, threats, if you do bring competition into the environment, you will pay dearly for it. you cannot expect a human being to perform at their best.
So it's interesting. There was an experiment done, the mouse utopia, by Dr. Calhoun, Rory Calhoun, something like that. And he conducted an experiment where he provided essentially a mouse universe where he had a very large pen and he gave the mice unlimited food, unlimited shelter, unlimited water. So they had unlimited resources. And what he found was that the mice, of course, the population exploded. But towards the end, when the population became very big, many of the male mice were seen to go off and do their own thing. He dubbed those mice the beautiful ones. They were the mice that didn't have any battle scars. They would sit in a corner and they would essentially groom themselves. They had no battle scars, whereas the rest of the male mice who were competing for access to the females had essentially destroyed each other and themselves, which is fascinating. One might say in our modern society, with this whole men going their own way movement, or the herbivore men of Japan, that it's a similar phenomenon. We have all our needs met in society.
Well, we have to look at what we've evolved from. And when the male disempowers the other half of the species that are going to carry his genes, of course that person's going to be very upset and do everything they can to maintain that power, that balance of power in their favour. And once upon a time, it would be, well, if you dare to end this arrangement, we will put you into exile. Now it's, I'm going to go get an expensive lawyer. But it achieves the same result, which is a man living in fear of being himself.
And isn't it interesting that one could draw the analogy of a banker? And if you go to the bank and you say to the banker, I would like to buy a house, the banker will say, okay, I'll loan you the money, but I'm going to take the house as security for the loan. Should you fail to pay back the loan...
Performance-based contract.
There you go. You fail to pay back the loan, the banker will take your house and will sell the house. But you as a man, when you enter into a relationship with a woman, where's your security? Men are not asking for security when it comes to women, but women are demanding it from men. So essentially, the male is taking all the risk by getting married, whereas women aren't taking any risk, and they're getting the benefit. The man is bringing security anyway, because on the whole, the man usually will earn more than the woman, and will usually have more assets saved up, and usually a better job, because women are looking to for higher status men who are earning more, have got more resources. If women are looking up to those types of men, then the male is bringing all the resources and security to the table. Where's his protection on the downside? I don't think he has any.
Well, the only protection that he has is his own protection, not to find himself in an unsavoury position by turning a blind eye to logic. Old saying, you work with your heart, you love with your head. You'll never get yourself into trouble.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we live in a world where we do the opposite. A man will fall in love with any woman who sleeps with him, and he'll use all of his logic and money-making ability for his job.
Yeah, that's very true, and a lot of men aren't willing to analyse relationships or to analyse women the way that they would analyse things on their job. They're also not willing to look within themselves to their own strengths and weaknesses. And that's something which I guess that's part of the reason that I sought out Thailand in particular, and expatting to Thailand and spending so much time over there, was that I could learn more about myself in that kind of environment where I guess you've got an underclass of people, you've got a red light, or big red light district in cities like Pattaya, and I learned more about myself in Pattaya as a man than what I learned here in the West. And I guess the reason why is because it was an acceleration of relationships, or an acceleration of liaisons with the people over there, which here in the West it would have taken me many years to achieve the same level of, liaisons as what I could have over there very quickly.
Well, bear in mind, every night's a wedding and every morning's a divorce.
Yeah, that's true. But when you're actually doing that, you realise that you realise how focused you are on female beauty as a man, and how after you've had a liaison with a woman, that the next morning you are still willing to do a lot for that woman. You are still willing. I guess I learned that men are the true romantics in that when it comes to relationships, and men will do a lot to be with a young, beautiful woman.
Well, romance is the blocking of a man's advances, but also the blocking of his retreats. In other words, keep him in limbo and wondering and disempowered. And hence comes the manipulation in order to do that. But people don't really know where they stand. They just know that if they make a decision, it's probably going to be a bad one. Time changes everything in relationships. When you first meet someone, you're swept away. You're swept away by the excitement, by the hormones. You're just swept away. You start to see your life through this other person. Over time, you realise that they are just a person with faults, with struggles, with needs, with wants, and you have to ask yourself, when I load all of this onto the scales of justice, which way is it going to go? If you don't take losing cases to court, you won't lose any. It's very, very important that you know what you are getting yourself into before it is too late in any relationship, whether it be friendship, work, marriage, long-term, same-sex, heterosexual. It is very important to be able to see through the veil of what is actually behind that pretty veneer, I guess you could say.
I think that's excellent advice. And the pretty veneer is what draws us as a man to a woman. But at the end of the day, it's the woman's character that we're going to end up with long term. In a relationship over time, as both the man and the woman gets older, we're going to lose our youth and our physical attractiveness.
It's called a clash of realities.
Clash of realities. And this is the thing, as the woman loses her youth and beauty, do men then start to have a wandering eye? Because what I've noted in relationships, and with the acceleration of liaisons over in a place like Thailand, it's very easy to have that wandering eye. And you realise that is your nature as a man. Your nature as a man is to be promiscuous, to have many different partners, and to go for youth and beauty. Whereas the nature of a woman seems to be to try to attract a higher status man who's going to stick around, I guess for childbearing, and who will provide resources and security. So the two requirements are they're at odds with one another.
Yes, but social engineering has removed the need for the man to stick around. Even if he doesn't stick around anymore, we intercept his wages.
Government as substitute provider.
So we sell his assets, restrict his freedoms, perhaps not able to drive a car or go overseas. In other words, we blackmail him to giving up his resources. Some accept it willingly. Oh, my kids, I've got to pay for it. Others do not accept it willingly, and they quit their job, and
some leave the country.
Some leave the country. This is a very complex issue. We no longer need a man's permission to access his resources and assets.
Which is interesting. And it's not just, the Western world. The entire world is essentially gynocentric in nature, if you consider it from the perspective that man's job is to provide, And the laws, no matter what the society it is, over time, as it becomes more technologically developed, and the laws are going to be set up in such a way that the man will serve the woman by threat of force, essentially. We will put you in jail, or we will take away your freedom and other things to make sure that you pay. Which it always interested me with guys who I've met over in Thailand, expats, who by many standards and many people who I know here in Australia would be considered to be bums, losers,
renegades,
outcasts, assholes,
problem
people. Yet these people I found actually talking to had very good reasons why they've taken the steps that they've taken.
Well, all they've done is re-empower themselves.
Exactly.
That's all they've done.
Yep.
They may not have done it by totally legal means, skipping the country, avoiding their child support, but these were just rules that were contrived by the people for the people. They've decided that they don't accept those rules, so they've left the country or perhaps have cash income, so that it is their decision how much of their resources are handed over. The big question in all of it is, it's easy to look back and see the picture. What you got yourself into, what you could have done, what you should have done. The question for males, the big question, is what is it going to take to educate these people not to find themselves in these situations over the next decade or perhaps several decades? It's very well understood in society that if you don't vaccinate yourself, you're going to get sick. Maybe lose your life if it's that serious. One of the big needs in society is to vaccinate people, both male and female, against what a human being is capable of to have their needs provided for. It's very easy to legalise something. You just call it a belief.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think when it comes to people, one of the things that I've decided, if I ever do expat long-term to Thailand, is I probably almost certainly wouldn't open a business directly with a Thai partner that I was romantically involved with. And I think the risks are just too high. And when it comes to any kind of business, I see a lot of people doing that over in Thailand. But I ask myself the question, well, what has actually led them to making that decision? And I look at it and I say, what makes a person from Western society up and leave their country? They up and leave their country and they set up in essentially a developing country like Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam. What has actually happened in their own country for them to make such a drastic decision where they felt that they could have a better life overseas?
Well, that's very easy to answer. They have a different value on freedom than others. In Australia, most Western countries, you can have a very, very good life. Materialistically and health-wise,
yeah.
As long as you toe the line and are compliant.
Yeah.
If you choose not to be compliant, have your own thoughts, live your own life, you will struggle. You will struggle to hold down a job long term. You'll struggle to have a partner long term. You'll always be seen as a problem.
And I think that pretty much describes my life, what you've just said.
Well, I've been accused of having problems by people with problems my whole life.
So I'm not alone. You've had similar experiences to me in terms of other people seeing you in that way. But then, of course, the two of us aren't alone either. Out on the internet, there's many men who we could describe as being red pill or red pill aware, who have gone through very similar circumstances or situations which have led them to the same place. And you could call it the men going their own way movement, or the herbivore men of Japan, or subgroups of those people who have chosen either to walk away from relationships, to go their own way in some way, shape or form, whether to leave the country or to do something different to the standard everyday things that are required of
nonconformist.
Like the 1984 Apple ad, I guess, that I guess symbolised the difference that Apple computer was compared to, say, the rest of the computer companies.
Well, any idea that's not considered dangerous is not really an idea at all, is it?
And this is it.
Well, in the words of Picasso, there are only two types of women, goddesses and doormats. And there are only two types of men, the enslaved and the free.
And I put it to you that freedom is not the natural state of man. Slavery is. And the problem is that trying to seek your freedom as a man starts to bring you into all these sorts of problems. People look at you in a different way. Other people put up barriers.
They won't invite you to be part of their social circles because they're afraid that your ideas may rub off.
It's interesting because there was a film, 1990 I believe it was, or thereabouts, Cape Fear. It was, there was an original Cape Fear, and this was
a remake with Robert De Niro.
That's it. And Robert De Niro said something interesting in the film that about every man having to go through hell to find his freedom and to find his heaven, so to speak. And I think it's different for each man. Each man comes to different realizations in life. I mean, my father was a great provider. That's something that I guess I'll remember about him. He always looked after his family, and he was a married man, and he stayed married and brought up myself and my two other brothers, provided for his wife and for ourselves. But I've noticed that, I guess, being essentially middle class now, I've been able to choose what I want to do, to choose whether I want that traditional life, to be a provider, or to try something different, to go my own way and to perhaps try to live a life of freedom on my terms. Perhaps I wouldn't have had this opportunity without living or being brought up in a traditionalist household. And I have found that the majority of the problems I've faced, I guess, in my work life and outside, I guess, in my social network, it's been from men who are living a traditionalist life, who are refusing to even question that. They've come from a traditional household and they've been brought up to be providers themselves.
Sounds like brainwashing to me.
Well, this is it. And I've told these men, I've said, look, I was brought up in a similar manner to you. I was brought up to be a provider. And I question this. I question wanting to do this. I question wanting to be that kind of provider for the rest of my life for a woman and family. Why can't I do these other things? Why can't I go off and expat to Thailand? Why can't I try alternative lifestyles or doing things different to what I guess a traditional man is expected to do? And I found that I've pretty much ran into problems once I decided that my freedom was the most important thing to focus on in my life. That's when the problems started occurring.
I bet it did. When people could no longer control you, I'm sure a lot of problems developed for you.
And it's all about, I guess, power and control. And
it's all about power.
And that's it. And there's that book, The 48 Laws of Power, which is an excellent book, and I read it when I was 17. And to this day, it's got a lot of Machiavelli techniques in there, but to be forearmed is to be forewarned. And I found that book was probably the best one out there when it comes to describing the power plays that people people engage in society, and that nothing's really changed. I mean, the examples in that book it goes back to the kings and queens, and they use the example of the royal court for all the 48 laws of power. And if you look at today's society, it's the same stuff. People are still playing the same power games. The technology has changed, but people essentially haven't.
Well, nothing has really changed. In the words of Genghis Khan, when they were building the Great Wall of China to try and keep him and his followers out, walls are wonderful, but they're only as good as the men who guard them.
Mm.
And he also went on to say that there is only one way to conquer a castle, and that is from the inside.
Mm. And that is very interesting, isn't it? The insider is usually the weakest link.
You'll always, if you get shot in the back, it will always come from your own doorway.
Mm. And it's funny, you think back, I think about my working life, and, I have allies, I have enemies. And I guess it's the same with everyone in their working life and in their normal life as well.
You know the difference between the allies and the enemies, don't you?
What's that?
Well, the enemies were once allies, but you wouldn't do what you were told.
Mm. That is interesting, isn't it? And one of the 48 laws of power says about the difference between enemies and friends, that you've got more to fear from your friends than from your enemies in many cases. And sometimes that if you hire a former enemy, that person will go to the end of the earth to help you because they've got something to prove. Whereas the friend will feel nothing but resentment and jealousy and irritation at you for employing them in the first place.
Well, if you want to know who your next enemy is going to be, just look around your circle of friends.
This is it.
Today's friend is tomorrow's enemy.
It's very true. I found that to be true in my life. And it's interesting that sometimes you know straight away when you meet someone that at some stage, if you're in a position where you can give them something or to elevate their status or power, and you know that person is particularly interested in power, particularly interested in control and dominating others, if you give them that edge, if you give them that step up.
You give them a taste of the sandwich, but you don't give them the whole sandwich.
Well, this is it. But sometimes you just know that they're going to do it, and you're probably going to regret the decision. And I found it interesting in my own life when I have helped people who I've known who would have gone on or who have gone on to do very interesting things, that it would be me ending up being fucked over at some point. That's one of the other laws of power. You may think that you're helping the drowning man by offering him a life raft or your hand, but essentially you're participating in your own demise.
Well, we've all been there and done that, haven't we? But without emotion, we wouldn't make such decisions, would we?
Mm. This is it, and the desire to help people. I think, which is the whole purpose of why we're even here, starting this series of podcasts. Because we know that there's people out there who are interested in these subjects and these themes, and we'd like to engage with them.
Yes, please feel free to contact us, and we will take a fresh look at what's on your mind.
This is it, and we're going to publish an email address in the video description, and feel free to contact us, and any sort of subjects that you'd like us to discuss on the air, we'd be interested in discussing them. I mean, you get a feel for what people are sort of interested in and what people are interested in talking about. And I think that with the two of us, we're obviously interested in freedom and in living a life where we have our peace of mind and we can do what we want to do and do our own thing, and to live a life on our terms. And I guess many men want to be able to achieve that, and they're going to achieve it try to achieve it in different ways. But we're always very interested in hearing from you, our listeners, and in responding to anything that you want us to talk about.
Let me ask you one question, Clarke. What's the hardest thing that you've achieved in your lifetime?
Hardest thing? I guess the work that I did for my startup, that was the hardest that was definitely the hardest thing that I've ever started work on and ever achieved that level of success at. And that was just getting to the starting line by developing a platform and getting it out there and getting people starting to use it. it was technically the most ambitious thing that I've ever started and finished. And I guess it's something I'm very proud of being able to get to that point where, and yet I know the odds when it comes to startups and everything. I knew I was taking on something which was almost certain to fail, but just getting to the starting line with a platform that's out there, that was a very satisfying thing.
Hardest thing that I've achieved in my lifetime is being myself. Almost everyone has tried to stop me.
And let's talk about being yourself, because when I developed this platform, I couldn't be myself. I had to become a completely different person to do the things that I did in terms of the business side of the company. And it is interesting that what you're talking about now, about being yourself. Let's talk about a little bit more about the reasons why you feel this way.
Well, I've lived in a world. My childhood was abusive. My early adulthood was abusive, and I've lived in a world. It was only abusive because I resisted it, resisted other people's control. Had I towed the line, I would have been the model son, the model partner.
Other people's expectations.
Other people's, not just expectations, other people's sense of entitlement. However, I chose to be myself, and naturally it caused a lot of sparks along the way. And initially, it's a lot easier to buy a general than it is to fight him. So they try and induce you to be the model citizen. I just want to be myself. Everyone else is taken. And I'm able to accept that, but others are not able to accept that I want to be myself.
And see, this particularly interests me because when we first met, and I guess we've known each other for a number of years now, from the very beginning, we accepted each other and each other's personhood. We were never there for any kind of money or anything else. We just wanted to know each other. We realised when we met that we would become friends, and that there was something about each other that we liked each other's personhood. And I find it fascinating in our society that it's so hard to achieve that, to value other people for their personhood and not for what they are, essentially. To value them for who they are, not for what they do.
People are valued for what they can provide.
Well, this is it.
There's a new god in town. It's called money. And everything comes back to dollars in the end. And in this society at the current moment, when a person, whether it be male or female, can see their own value as a person, they will discover that all of their friendships and all of their relationships are in trouble. And the reason for that is because they're all built on an underlying assumption that what this person is providing is undervalued. You're never good enough. We need better from you. We need more from you. And when the person can see it for themselves, that all the friendships/relationships are built on this premise, they are seen very differently by others. In other words, the game's up. If you want to, when I look back at my life, the times that I've seen real anger in others is when you've called a con a con.
It's funny because I think about Thailand when you say that, the whole concept of saving face. And if you're in a situation where you're being scammed and you know you're being scammed.
It's a terrible feeling, isn't it?
It is.
How many carpets have you bought, Clarke?
Go along with it.
Oh, okay.
And go along with the scam. And never let the scammer lose face. Try to get out of it, of course, but don't let them lose face, because face, when it comes to situations in Thailand and losing face, can get you killed.
Street credibility.
This is it. But isn't it very similar here in the West? We don't really talk about the subject of face as much as what I guess it would be talked about or thought of in terms of importance in the developing world, particularly in Thailand or in other Asian societies. But here in the West, we still have that concept. We might call it something different. Status, perceptions of the other person. But it does come back to the same thing, essentially. And the people who are trying to gain power over you, I find it fascinating to watch these people, because they'll often be trying to gain that power by speaking to other powerful people, bitching, backstabbing, undermining, lies about you and about your personhood. So they can, I guess the game is that I'll make this person look bad so that I can make myself look better.
There's an easy way out of that one. You start your own rumours. And as Oscar Wilde said, the bigger the lie, the easier it is to believe it.
Yeah, it's very good, isn't it?
It's very true. It's very true. And on that note, I think I need to go and polish my Rolls Royce, Clarke.
Very good.
Have you seen my new Rolls Royce? Not the first one, the second one. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen it yet. You have to show it to me.
I might get a third one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Very good. I always look forward to a ride in a luxury car. You know, I've got a piece of crap that Hyundai gets that's sitting out the front. I've never been in a position to afford a really good car, so...
Well, neither have I, but if I tell you I have a good car, wouldn't you want to be my friend?
But isn't it interesting, we're doing this show in a basement at the moment, and from the very beginning it was never about wealth or status or any of that stuff with the two of us. It was always about personhood. So
and it will always be about personhood. We would like to bring the message to the world. You need to see your value, your own value as a person.
I think it's very important. And I'll sort of mention that I didn't really fully grasp just how much men can value another man for his personhood until I actually went to Thailand and started having dealings over there with members of the third gender who I found would also value you for your personhood instead of what you could provide. Like I guess many women sort of value many men for. You know, what does that man do? What can he provide? How much does he bring to the table? I found it very different with people over there, even though that society is driven very, very much by money. I think there is a big difference in the sexes when it comes to how they value each other.
Well, there's a big difference in the belief systems. We predominantly in Australia is a multicultural society, but predominantly we are a Christian country still. And hence there is a lot of belief systems that have come down through the church and through our school system, through families, middle-class families in particular. The majority of Thai people are Buddhist. Very different belief system. Value each other, value nature, value anything that's living. Don't sell today's air for dollars.
And I find it fascinating, the differences in our societies and what you can achieve over in Thailand compared to here in the West, how you're seen over there compared to how you're seen here. And I guess the Buddhists, you know, some people have said to me, oh, look at that person over there. They've got a tattoo with this Farang, this Western person's name on, you know, all over their back, in big letters. But then I've heard, well, hang on a second, the Thais are Buddhists. Many of the Buddhists, the majority of them, don't care too much about the current day skin and the look in terms of, you know, tattooing and all the rest of that stuff. Getting another person's name tattooed on their body is no big deal to a Buddhist compared to how much it would be a big deal to a Christian.
Well, tattoos are really just scars with ink in them.
Yeah.
Those that get someone else's name or initials, it's starting an insurance contract. How could you leave me? I've got your name branded in my backside. that is clearly driven by insecurity and fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Interesting, and we'll save that for another day,
Another episode.
another episode.
All right. So we hope that you've enjoyed this this first podcast, and we're looking forward to having many more of these. And
I'm sure they're going to get better.
I'm sure that they will over time. Bear with us. This is our first, so we're going to keep working on our technique, and we'll work on a bit of an introduction and a conclusion to each. But we've got a lot of different subjects that we want to bring to you, and I think that.
And bring us more subjects.
Yeah, bring us more.
Bring us more. We just want to broaden our horizons and better mankind in the process.
Definitely. We're interested in your personhood as our viewers and as our audience, and we're specifically and very much interested in the things that we're not allowed to talk about in society.
Ooh, taboo.
Taboo subjects.
Ooh.
We want to get them all out there. We're not going to belittle you or to put you down.
No, there's no judgments. No judgments.
No judgments here. We're very interested in talking about all the hard things. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for your time.
All right.